welcome back to the program. Thank you so much. On this Johnny Cash Friday, Congressman Bruce Westerman won on Tuesday in the primary. He had a primary opponent. He got 79.89% of the vote. And so now he moves on. He gets the nomination for the Republican Party, and Bruce Westerman joins us now. He's on the phone. Congratulations, Congressman.
Thanks, Paul. Good to be with you this morning on your Johnny Cash Friday. I always enjoy that.
It is always a good one, yeah. And this is one of my favorite ones just because it really does take a lighthearted approach to how, we could make these political discussions super serious, but it's pretty funny how a whole band
takes
can
a little bit of mental gymnastics to follow the storyline.
Yeah, it really does. It really does. And I love how even back in in Johnny Cash's day, you have that one guy who just burns his driver's license. He's like, I don't want to be tracked. I don't need this. I don't need to stop at a red light. That's just the government trying to tell me to stop my car.
Yeah.
It's pretty funny.
Big Brother's always been there, I guess.
Yeah, it really has. All right, so Congressman Westerman, since you've been in office in D.C., you've sponsored or co-sponsored 17 bills which have been signed into law, more than 80 bills which have passed the House. You got any favorites out of that resume?
Well, obviously the Resilient Federal Forest Act was probably the biggest bill that I've personally sponsored. That the most contentious one that got the most notoriety, I guess you'd say. I've passed that out of the House twice, and we've been able to get bits and pieces of that into different pieces of legislation. So there's a good difference being made out there. But when you look at the tax cut bill, and there's a lot of good things that we've been able to do in Congress, especially with this new administration, in getting bills signed into law. And this week was actually a big week where we had the changes to the Dodd-Frank bill that the President signed yesterday. This is something that we passed in the House months ago. We called it the Financial Choice Act. And there were regulations put in place under the Obama administration that were just playing havoc with community banks and small financial institutions. We were seeing them close one after the other all across the country, and Arkansas is no exemption. And these community banks play a vital role, especially in rural America. And the Obama administration had put the same heavy-handed regulatory burden on community banks that the Wall Street banks were facing. This stemmed from the financial crisis that was caused by the Wall Street banks, that the community banks had no part in, but boy, they were paying the price for it. And who ultimately pays the price for regulations like that are small businesses and consumers, who are the backbone of the economy. So I was very pleased to see us pass the bill out of the House that the Senate sent back and get that on the President's desk, get signed into law.
Yeah, that is that is good. The 90%. So I've got something in front of me that says the passage of the Dodd-Frank reform. 90% of the bill passed this week. So 90% of it. So do you know what the other 10% is that you guys hope to do in the future?
Yeah, and I think what that means is that of the bill that we passed out of the House, called the Financial Choice Act, which was, I think, more of the standard for what the legislation should have been, only 90%, or maybe I should say 90% of that was able to get through the Senate. And a lot of it was on the way that we provided off-ramps out of these regulatory burdens in the House. We had a pretty rapid off-ramp where the Senate had a more gradual off-ramp. We did some things like we eliminated the CFPB in the House version. The Senate just put some restraints on the CFPB. So our bill was much more aggressive, and but at the end of the day, somebody went through it and decided that about 90% of what we had in the House version made it through on the Senate version.
Okay. That is...
think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, good morning, everyone. Good morning. You are listening to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell, and this is Josh Waters with you this morning. Paul is on vacation with his family, and I'm honored to be able to step in for him today and get you caught up on the news of the day in Arkansas politics. This is the intersection of conservative ideas and reality, and you can be part of the show today. Please still call in and text. You can call or text at 870-275-9799. We're broadcasting across the state, so thank you for all the listeners listening on terrestrial radio, and we're also broadcasting live on Facebook. If you don't already like the Conduit News Facebook page, go over there and facebook.com/Conduit News and give that a like. You can also watch on YouTube, Conduit News, and at conduitnews.com. So we got a full show today. I'm really excited to have some guests on later today at 6:30. We're going to have Libertarian candidate for governor Mark West will be on with us to talk about his race. He just got an endorsement in that race, so we'll talk some about that, I'm sure. Coming up at 7 o'clock, we're going to have a conservative future segment with Mr. Drake Mowdy from Fayetteville. He's with the University of Arkansas College Republicans. And then at 7:30 today, we're going to be visiting with Dr. Joe Cloud. He is running for state representative in House District 71. That's the Russellville area. And so we're looking forward to visiting with him. But today, the big news, I guess it broke yesterday mid-morning. The big news is that the House Speaker of the Arkansas House of Representatives, Jeremy Gillum, is resigning. And he's going to be resigning effective June 15th, and he is going to be taking a lobbying position with the University of Central Arkansas. And so there's an article out today that really breaks it down very well and gives some extra context to this, idea that Paul and Conduit News has covered for a while now. It's kind of a revolving door, so to speak, between a state legislator moving into a lobbyist role. And so, typically there's a 2-year ban on a state legislator moving into a lobbyist role. But there's an exemption if you go lobby for a government entity. So the headline from the Arkansas Democrat-Gazette, article by Deborah Hale Shelton and Mike Wickline, is State Speaker Gillum to quit as a legislator, hired at UCA, doesn't see himself as a lobbyist, he says. Out of Conway, Jeremy Gillum, a 2-term Speaker of the Arkansas House, is resigning from the legislature to take a position that will include lobbying and other activities for the University of Central Arkansas. He says, quote, "It is bittersweet to leave the legislature where he served since 2011, but he is excited about the new opportunity." Gillum submitted a letter of resignation effective at 5 p.m. June 15th to the governor's office on Wednesday. He will become UCA's Director of Governmental Relations and External Affairs the next day. His annual salary, Joe, what do you predict his annual salary to be? What would you think a lobbyist for a college would get?
At least double what he's making now.
At least double? Okay, so he's making $47,000 right now as House Speaker. Well, his new lobbying gig, he's going to be making $130,000.
So a little under 3 times.
Yep. Yeah, he's getting a very nice pay increase. to go lobby for UCA. Jeremy Gillum represents House District 45, which covers part of White County. I think the biggest area there is the BB area. So if you're listening on 101 FM, The Answer out of Little Rock, you're probably wondering, well, what's going to happen now if he's resigning? There's going to be a special election that will be held. And the dates and more information about that will come out. But the gentleman that ran for his seat, because he had already announced he wasn't running for re-election. And so there is, the primary election was held, and I don't think he has a Democrat opponent. So that'll be filled. But going forward, we are going to have a new House Speaker to at least finish out the term that will take over those responsibilities. Even though there's not another session plan, there could be a special session, but there's no session plan. There'll still be a new House Speaker. This article also, though, talked about Jeremy Gillum and his brother recently sold their 450-acre berry farm in White County last month. Ritter Crop Services of Jonesboro bought the farm for $1.3 million, according to the White County Assessor's Office. So, in going back, so the House will caucus on June 15th to choose his successor as House Speaker. He said he hopes the chamber promotes Speaker-designate Matthew Shepard, the Republican of El Dorado, to the position. Davis said Wednesday that he was impressed that Gillum had twice been chosen House Speaker. Talking about Andy Davis here, who ran for House Speaker and lost to Matthew Shepard. And so that's where we are. Let's scroll down here. It says that Gillum will be representing UCA's interests as well as providing information relating to higher education. And then this is the part of the article that, kind of piqued my interest somewhat, is this idea of, revolving door legislator to lobbyists, lobbying for the government. It says here, state lawmakers are subject to a 2-year cooling off period for registering at lobbyists, said Graham Sloan, director of the Arkansas Ethics Commission. But state law provides an exception to registering as a lobbyist for a public servant acting in his official capacity under certain conditions. And so a former member of the General Assembly whose term of office had expired could take a job with the state university, engage in lobbying activities, and not be required to register as a lobbyist as long as they don't receive $400 in a calendar quarter from a non-governmental source for lobbying. So as long as he's not also being paid on the side more than $400 a quarter from a private entity to lobby, then he won't have to register as a lobbyist, and he fits under this exemption. It says for several months there has been speculation about whether Gillum would go to work for a state agency such as UCA or the State Plant Board. State Representative Michael John Gray, a Democrat of Augusta, said that UCA's announcement Wednesday was obviously not a surprise to anyone. Michael John Gray is also the state party chairman for the Democrat Party of Arkansas. He also said, quote, it is a little surprising that he resigned in the middle of his term to do it, said Gray, who is chairman of the state Democrat Party. And he talks a little bit about the loophole about allowing legislators to immediately go into lobbying and other government jobs. He says the loophole, quote, speaks to the things that people don't like about government, and lawmakers should make it clear to the public that the exemption exists, Gray said. He said he isn't taking a shot at Gillum or begrudging him for taking his job with UCA. He said, quote, but I just think that it is a problem in our system, end quote. Let's see here. J.R. Davis, a spokesman for Republican Governor Asa Hutchinson, said the governor plans to call a special election to fill the vacancy in House District 45. In the November 6th general election, BB Republican Jim Wooten is unopposed for that seat, but the next legislative term won't start until mid-January. In a written statement, Hutchinson said, quote, that Gillum has been a tremendous asset to Arkansas throughout his years of service in the House of Representatives. That, like we talked about a few minutes ago, what this has also done is it's triggered that there's going to have to be a new House Speaker for at least, the next few months to finish out the year until January. And so yesterday on Twitter, Andy Davis, actually sent out a tweet almost just a few hours after this announcement came out. And so Andy Davis ran for House Speaker against Matthew Shepard and was defeated. And Andy Davis sent out this tweet. He said, "I encourage my House colleagues to join me in supporting Speaker-designate Shepard in assuming the role of House Speaker for the remainder of this term. He will be a great leader for the 92nd General Assembly, and there's no reason to delay the work ahead." So Andy Davis has endorsed Matthew Shepard to fill this, vacancy in the near term. And then Matthew Shepard actually sent out a tweet shortly after that thanking Speaker Gillum for his service and leadership in the Arkansas House. And I think he also sent out a tweet I thought I saw where thanking Andy Davis for the kind words. So that is probably what's going to happen when they caucus, I imagine, is that the caucus and the House will just elect or appoint. I guess it would have to be an election of Matthew Shepard to fill the House Speaker role. But that's the big news this morning. The Arkansas House of Representatives Speaker Jeremy Gillum will be resigning effective June 15th, and he is going to become a lobbyist for UCA. Now, if some people remember, there is also a recent legislator who went and became a lobbyist for UCA, and that one didn't end so well. Talking about Gilbert Baker, I think in this article it alludes to it at some point. Gillum is the second lawmaker in recent years to take a lobbying position with UCA. In January 2013, when his legislative term ended, former State Senator Gilbert Baker, Republican of Conway, became executive assistant to then UCA President Tom Courtway. Baker resigned that position in April 2014 and is a music teacher at UCA. He had to resign. Do what? Well, it was kind of I think it was a compromise, because if you remember, Gilbert Baker was caught up in the Mike Maggio and Michael Morton bribing a judge situation, and then if I remember correctly, I believe he was arrested for drug possession shortly after that. And then the article goes on and talks about several other legislators that moved into lobbying careers. Arkansas Tech University hired former Representative Phil Jacobs, Democrat of Clarksville, in 2005 as Associate Vice President for Governmental Affairs after his term ended. He is a registered lobbyist. Former Senator Shane Broadway, Democrat of Bryant, has been Arkansas State University Systems Vice President for Government Relations since 2015. So it says other lawmakers have taken different government jobs. In June 2016, State Rep. Kelly Link, Republican of Flippin, resigned to become the Department of Human Services Chief of Legislative and Governmental Affairs. Senator Eddie Joe Williams resigned recently to serve on Donald Trump's Southern States Energy Board. David Branscombe resigned in November to take a job with the U.S. Department of Agriculture. It's just, I think there's an article at Conduit for Action talks about the revolving door of state legislators moving into lobbyist roles, and a lot of time lobbyist roles for government or other government jobs. The article said pretty much everyone assumed he was going to go get a government job in a state agency. So it's probably happening maybe sooner than people realize, but for $130,000, I'd pull the trigger pretty quick too. So we're going to go ahead and take a break right now. You're listening to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul today, and we'll be back right after this break. Like I wasn't talking 100 miles an hour for the first time. Maybe that's the good thing about mornings is it slows you down.
It's a PHP parody.
Hey, man, you got any of that marble rock?
Yeah, I've got the hookup.
Thanks. I need a fix real bad. I'm itching to grow some government.
How much you need?
I'm gonna need a taxpayer's dime bag.
No problem, sir. 1 taxpayer dime of marble rock. Enjoy.
Thanks, man. They don't call it Little Rock for nothing. Am I right?
Did you know your state representative or state senator may be addicted to growing government? The drug is called marble rock, and too much of it will cause marble fever. Watch for the warning signs. Does your legislator suddenly display a lack of humility when faced with basic questions? Does he or she suddenly develop hubris and pride that was not present during the campaign for office? These are signs they might be smoking the terrible drug, marble rock. The solution? Detox. Vote for detox. Vote to send them home for their own good. Warning! Some politicians once voted out of office will not go home and stay in Little Rock to get their fix by lobbying, also known as the Burris Syndrome.
PHP parody. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is building a liberty machine. Find out more at conduitnews.com.
Back, everyone. Welcome back. You're listening to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul today. And if you're just joining us, we're just talking about how House Speaker Jeremy Gillum is going to be resigning his position and becoming a lobbyist for UCA. And so I just got a text message, and, I think it's very, very on point. It says, how can we tolerate government lobbying government for more government? Unfortunately, we see a lot of that down there. The rooms usually during the legislative session are filled with lobbyists or liaisons or whatever their title is for, other government entities, state agencies, that kind of thing, lobbying to protect their piece of the pie of government and to make sure it keeps growing. So that's your tax dollars at work. We got just a few minutes before the break here, but I'll get into this a little bit. Might need to go more into it later on in the show, but the tax task force is still meeting. They're really going to be ramping up their meetings in the next couple of months. And one thing that happened after the most recent meeting was it prompted a post from Family Council. And I think we have that post we can put up from Family Council. It's from May 23rd, 2018. And the title is Arkansas Lawmakers Looking at Proposal to Tax Churches. Joe, do we have that article for our online audience? That Family Council article. So May 23rd, that was the day after the primaries. That was the most recent meeting of the tax task force, and the headline is Arkansas Lawmakers Looking at Proposal to Tax Churches. And so this went out because when you just go read the agenda, there is a quote, a proposal to tax investment, passive income, and sales by churches. The post says under current Arkansas law, they do not impose a state tax on interest churches earn investing money in savings account or on the sale or rental of church property. And so it says here, charities and churches contribute at least $378 billion to the U.S. economy each year, and possibly much more. And then it even says, this isn't the first tax increase the task force has looked at this year. A few weeks ago, the task force voted to move forward with discussions about increasing the state sales tax on groceries and ending Arkansas's annual back-to-school tax holiday. And so for people, who might not be following the task force that closely, what they're doing now with these proposals, they're basically putting everything on the table, and then they're making a list and saying, okay, from this list, which proposals do we want to study more, right? And so the proposals they put forward is, well, let's study raising the grocery tax more. Let's propose looking at ending the sales tax holiday. Let's look at, some form of taxation on churches.
So they're Santa Clausing all of the tax exemptions and taxes that they could impose. Which ones are naughty, which ones are nice.
Yeah.
And they're checking it twice.
That's right. And so, obviously, I think hopefully everyone understands. If not, we want to make sure people understand that this task force can't pass a law right now. They can come up with proposals to send to the legislature in 2019. But what they are doing is they're affirmatively saying, hey, we have this list here. Let's look at this one. Which by default, they're also saying, hey, that tax exemption for farm equipment, let's not study that because we know we don't want to upset the farmers. That's not a good idea, right? Right. That's it's obviously not politically smart. But for some reason, they're saying, okay, yes, let's look at raising the grocery tax. Let's look at ending the sales tax holiday. Let's study taxes on churches. And so this has actually upset some legislators. And, the reason I think this was a good post from Family Council is because the very next day they had a new post, and the headline is, Senator says task force not interested in taxing churches. And it says that yesterday we wrote about a proposal at the legislature to tax passive income of churches. The proposal was among those up for consideration at the legislator's Tax Reform and Relief Task Force. It says Senator Hendren is the Senate chairman of the task force. Jerry Cox wrote this. He said, I spoke with Senator Hendren this morning, and he has assured me that the task force has no interest in eliminating churches' passive income tax exemption. I'm deeply grateful to everyone who contacted their state legislators yesterday to express their concern about this proposal, and I hope our elected officials will continue working to ensure taxes are not increased on churches and charities. So I see that as a victory. Within one day, the chairman of the tax task force is reaching out to Family Council, who put this article up and saying, hey, we're not going to do that. Presumably they heard a lot of feedback from constituents, I'm sure, that said, why are you looking at taxing churches? So I think that's a victory, and I think that's exactly what we have to do. We have to get the information out to the people and say, hey, this is what the legislature is looking at. Okay, this is on their agenda. Please call them, tell them how you feel about it, right? That's political speech, and we'll talk more tomorrow about free speech and the importance of free speech, and especially political speech, how important that is. But we'll get to it maybe more. I'm not sure we have time right now, but several politicians have been upset that these groups are letting people know, and even the Democrat Gazette and local news channels have let people know, hey, they're looking at raising the grocery tax. Conduit for Action came out in January saying this is already on their agenda. They're going to be looking at it. They talked about it at several meetings. And so we'll go over later in the show today some Facebook posts from some of these politicians who are out there complaining about groups. What they are saying is dishonest, and they're saying, what they always say, oh, they're lying. We're not trying to do that. But at the end of the day, they're putting these proposals on the table to study. They're looking at it, and the only way you can respond to that is, hey, they're looking at this, contact them, let them know how you feel. That's the great thing about our system of government, and I wish more people were, calling their legislators and keeping up to date on what the tax task force is doing. So we're going to take another break here, and when we come back, we're going to have Mark West, who's running for governor. He's the Libertarian candidate for governor, and we'll be talking with him when we come back.
It's a good, that's a good explanation. We're talking with Congressman Bruce Westerman. He is from District 4, just coming out of a massive primary win for him. Congressman, what else? Tell me about this. I saw this over on Fox News, the passage of a right to try for terminally ill patients. We're looking at the Fox News article right now. Tell us about this.
Yeah, and this was another big bill that goes to the president's desk. That all this happened on Tuesday. the day of the primary election, I was in D.C. voting for these bills, but we got the financial reforms and this Right to Try Act passed that allows terminally ill patients to use experimental drugs if they choose to do so. The FDA had put barriers up that would prevent people from trying these experimental drugs, but I think people deserve that right to try those drugs if if the doctors have said there's nothing else we can do for you, but they know there's an experimental drug that hasn't made it through all the FDA trials yet. Mm-hmm. We gave patients that right to choose.
Wow. Did you guys have any pushback against that? I'm curious. I mean, because you would think this is just a basic concept. I mean, I wish you could. I mean, I wish people had more freedom to try this kind of stuff before they were, given a death sentence. Personally, I mean, I would go even further with it. But did you have any pushback from people? Go ahead.
I had a lot of pushback from Nancy Pelosi and her friends on the other side of the aisle. Saying that allowing somebody to take a drug that the FDA hasn't determined the effects of it is cruel. Those kinds of arguments. But if your option is you're going to die, or you could possibly try this drug, I would want the right to try the drug.
Yeah, and here's the thing. With these days, in this time, there are so many resources out there for people to do their own research. I mean, I was watching a podcast the other day where they were saying, there's this clinic down in Panama where they're having these amazing successes with this certain type of stem cell, and of course they're ethical stem cells. They're not embryonic. They're but yet we've got regulations here that are preventing that treatment from being done, in the United States. But down there, they're having these incredible results. And so I guess my point is, there's all this information out there that people can get with the internet to kind of make their own decisions. And so, why not? And of course, if you're terminally ill, you're not just going to go out and try any old drug. You're going to be like, okay, I think this is going to help me. And you're going to do the research. I think most people would say that's a reasonable.
Determined to drain the swamp in Little Rock, it's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, good morning and welcome back. Welcome back to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul today. And right now, we have coming up here in just a minute, Mark West is the Libertarian candidate for governor, and over at Talk Business and Politics, they have a article out, and the headline is Libertarian Mark West picks up Democratic gubernatorial candidate Leticia Sanders' endorsement. And it says here, in a Facebook post, Sanders asked her supporters to cast their vote for West. She says, quote, "I am with West. We are both on the same accord of views of how to make Arkansas great for the people in this state. I hope in the general election that my supporters that voted for me in the primary will change their votes for Mark West, the Libertarian." So we have Mark West on the phone now. So Mark, welcome to the show, and I guess congratulations on this endorsement.
Thank you, Josh. Thank you for having me on. I appreciate the opportunity to get on here, and I try to take advantage of every opportunity I can get to speak to voters in Arkansas. And yes, Leticia's endorsement, it is big. It's major because you typically don't have cross-party endorsements like that, and that kind of came as a surprise. She called me and wanted to talk, and after our conversation, she said that she would like to endorse, and we were willing to accept the endorsement. We are on the same track as far as trying to end the establishment. That was the biggest problem and concern that she had was the establishment was running the Democrat Party, the establishment is running the Republican Party, and she felt the only way to really truly send a message to both parties was for her to do a cross-party endorsement and basically thumb thumb her nose at the establishment and say, you know what, this office should belong to the people of the state of Arkansas and not to the lobbyists and the special interests that are controlling both parties.
Yeah, it's kind of a very interesting election. Like you said, she was a Democrat running in the primary, and she is not endorsing the I guess now Democrat nominee Jared Henderson. She got 37% of the Democrat primary vote, and then also when you look at Jan Morgan, she's not endorsing Asa Hutchinson for governor. So the two primary opponents that got tens of thousands, I don't know the number, probably 80 or 90,000 votes, are not endorsing their primary opponents heading into the general election.
Yeah, that's right. I mean, and that is not typical for politics, but it does show that the two candidates, Jan and Leticia, are both anti-establishment. They were trying to take on the establishment with their campaigns, and therefore they see the people that won the races. They see Asa and Jared as just two different heads of the same establishment. Both are going to push to hurt the average Arkansan with their policies, and it's going to be an interesting election season to see how that plays out.
Yeah, absolutely. 2016 was I think caught everyone by surprise with Trump in the primary, and then him ultimately winning. I think 2018 is going to have a lot of surprises as well. So we'll just get us caught up on the campaign and how it's going. I know the primaries kind of sucked a lot of air, at least news-wise, into just the Democrat and Republican primaries. But now that we're in the general election, it's you, Mark West, the Libertarian, and versus Jared Henderson, the Democrat, versus Asa Hutchinson, the Republican. So what's the campaign been like since the primaries have ended and going through this summer?
Well, one big thing we did during the primary season, because we knew that all the focus was going to be on the two major party primaries, we actually put together an action plan, a 10-step action plan for making Arkansas a destination state. And if you go to my website, markwest4governor.com, that is the number 4, those 10 steps are linked to in that on the home page of the website. And it revolves around a couple of core things, and one of those core things is what we are calling cost, or the Committee on Spending and Taxation. The governor right now has a tax task force, like somehow making taxes more revenue neutral is the problem with Arkansas, and that's just wholly false. The problem with Arkansas is a spending problem, and once you cut spending and get spending down, then you can do across-the-board tax cuts that everybody feels when they get their paycheck every week. Across-the-board tax cuts for your family businesses so they can expand and do more hiring. We want Arkansas to be the destination state for families and jobs, and we believe going through this Committee on Spending and Taxation, one thing it's not going to do, it's not going to add spending, because it is going to be a voluntary thing. It's only going to be people that volunteer to be a part of it, but we're going to look at everything our government does. And again, this is just step one. We're going to look at everything the government does. We're going to find areas of redundancy. We're going to find areas of overlap. We're going to find areas of inefficiency, and we're going to address those through the state legislature and get our government more efficient, get rid of the redundancy, the overlap, and make our government function better. And then once we do that, we're going to start looking at the areas of spending where we need cuts. One of those is going to be working to repeal Arkansas Works and shift the care, shift that form of health care into the free market. And part of that is also going to be involved in actually looking at why health care is as expensive as it is, from prescription medicine costs to doctor visit costs, and we're going to try to clean up the swamp. We need to drain the swamp in Little Rock. It is, as you were just talking about the first half hour of the show with Gilliam. You have this unhealthy revolving door, this back and forth between lobbyists and members of the state legislature, and that's why you have spending. And we hope that our policies and the things we're going to push for will help make our government more transparent, and it will clean it up and it will make it more ethical. But those are the things we're going to push the legislature for. Those are things that we want to see if we can win the election for governor.
Okay. Yeah, I think that's kind of the unspoken thing down there, unfortunately, too much is, what spending is looking like, because we hear about the income tax, and that's been a good start. But when you look at spending, we've increased spending over $600 million the last few fiscal years now, and that's just not sustainable. The lieutenant governors come out and said, a lot of what you're saying too. We have to look at spending and get that under control, and he talks about transformation, and so it sounds like y'all be able to work well on there. I just pulled up your website, Mark, about these action plans. MarkWestForGovernor.com is the website. You can see Mark's 10-step action plan to make Arkansas the destination state. And one of these, Mark, is making human life matter. And that's something I think, some people, they think, okay, Republicans are pro-life, Democrats are pro-choice, and they may not know where a libertarian stands or a specific candidate for the Libertarian Party stands. So talk a little bit about that issue, making human life matter, in your position on life.
Certainly, and a lot of the confusion is people look at the National Libertarian Platform and they say, well, this plank seems to, favor, abortion, but really what it does is it says you can be either as a libertarian, because there is a lot of debate. I'd say our party nationally is split 50-50 on the issue. I am a pro-life libertarian. As a pastor, I've been a pastor for 15 years, and I believe that not just the Bible, but I believe science as well shows that a new life, a new human life, begins at conception. So if we're going to approach it from a scientific aspect, we have to recognize that is when a new life begins. And once that new life has begun, it falls under one of the few functions of a government. Our founding fathers laid out why we should have government: to protect our right to life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Well, life is foremost in that list. So one of the few functions of our government should be to protect human life. And we have to protect the unborn life. That is the most vulnerable human life in our country, and we need to protect that human life. And some of the things that we can do, Linda Collins Smith's bill, it got upheld in the Supreme Court, which was awesome. That was a great step toward preserving human life in Arkansas. Other things that we can do is I believe we can make the options better for women in crisis pregnancies. We can, one of the things we can do as a governor and a state legislature is, work on the regulations that are making private adoptions so hard to get and making them so expensive, so that we open that up so that you can have more private adoptions for women that are in crisis pregnancies. We need to be partnering with people on the local level, with individuals and with charitable organizations on the local level to help provide for healthcare needs and education needs and child care needs and those type of things for women that are in crisis pregnancies. We need to do everything we can to make the choice of life the most desirable option, on top of working to make sure that our government does protect human life.
Yeah, that's great. Like you said, I think there is some confusion, but to hear, you seem to have a very strong pro-life stance, which I think probably aligns with most Arkansans that are, strongly pro-life across the state. One thing you said, Mark, talked about in kind of the opening there was the issue of Arkansas Works and that program, and then I know we were talking the other day about kind of the work requirements aspect of that, and I thought you had a really interesting take on kind of the work requirements program, but if you wanted to talk about that and your thoughts on that, I thought that was a really interesting take, something I hadn't thought of before.
Certainly. It is one area that exposes where the swamp is ruling in Little Rock, because what Arkansas Works has become, especially with this this work aspect of it, is basically it becomes a subsidy for bigger corporations, and these bigger corporations have hiring practices where they, they'll maybe they won't hire anybody to work any more than 15 hours a week, and they're going to pay them, barely pay them minimum wage, and they're not going to provide health care, and they're not going to provide any of these things as an employer. So what this does, so many employees that are working for these big corporations are having to draw food stamps. They're making so little at their job that they're able to qualify for food stamps, and they're able to qualify for Arkansas Works. And what this basically has become is a big subsidy for these big corporations. So basically, it's just another way to subsidize those special interests and those big corporations that are supporting the establishment. This is just another subsidy for them, and that's sad. But that's what it's become, and it just exposes how deep the swamp is in Little Rock.
Yeah. I mean, that's something you don't think about it that way, but really that's a really good point about how these large corporations kind of will benefit from this work requirement. If you think about it, if they just have people work enough to be eligible, or not work more than what would be where they wouldn't be eligible. Because if they worked full time, 40 hours a week, $9, $10, $11 an hour, they probably wouldn't even be eligible for the Arkansas Works program. And so the employers that kind of keep those hours back to where they are eligible, it further provides them from, I guess, not having to, or knowing, well, we won't provide that as a private company, or we see that as the role of government, and we'll support that, we'll lobby for that, we'll push for that with our lobbying efforts. So very, very interesting insight on that. Mark, I want to give you the last word. I know you got maybe some events coming up, or where can people see you or hear more about you, and then if you want to touch on the Second Amendment too. I know you have a strong Second Amendment stance, so I'll give you the last word and whatever you want to relay to the voters.
Sure. I just want to say on the Second Amendment, I believe that we have a God-given human right to self-defense. That human right goes with us everywhere that we go. So we have a right in this state to carry a firearm for our self-defense, either openly or concealed without a government permission slip or a license or anything of that sort. So I believe that we need to expand and further clarify the Act 746, because the people have that right. And right now it's been muddied up by the governor and by the attorney general. There's no clear message out there. But that's one of the things I'll work toward if elected governor, is ending all the concealed carry license and the enhanced concealed carry licenses. People shouldn't have to have a license to arm themselves for self-defense, and it's irrelevant of whether they want to carry the firearm open or whether they want to conceal that firearm. They have that right, and that's something I will fight for if I am elected governor. And on that, I'm hoping to be at a Patriots of Act 746 lunch at Tamales at 2:30 on Saturday. I'm hoping to be able to make it. My son has a band concert in Conway that morning, so it depends on if we get done and can get back through in time to get there. But my goal is to be there. I'm going to be doing a Q&A in Fort Smith, or meeting with a Q&A group in Fort Smith Tuesday morning at 8, and going to be meeting at the VFW convention tomorrow. So it's going to be a busy time. And plus, I told you the other day on the phone, one thing I do with my kids, Batesville Community Theater does a play every summer, and we're doing Annie this year. And for the next 2 weeks, we're going to be very, about every night until nearly the last week of June, we're going to be working on Annie every night. So it's going to be quite a busy slate. Looking forward to July and actually when the full campaign season gets into gear in August. So that's what we're doing, and that's where we're going to be. I appreciate anybody if you get a chance. Check out the website, markwest4governor.com, and that is the number 4. You can also find me on Facebook and Twitter at markwest, the number 4, and then GOV.
All right. Well, Mark, I appreciate you coming on today, and if you want to learn more about Mark West, markwestforgovernor.com. And we appreciate you coming on, Mark, and keep us informed, and hopefully we can do it again.
All right, we'll do. Thank you very much.
All righty, have a good day. Well, folks, we're going to go ahead and take another break right now. You're listening to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul today, and we'll be right back.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor-lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
Money, power, prestige, essence, available now from aristocrats serving Arkansas. From Zenata Rhino Collection, the fragrance of backroom deals, nepotism, the aroma of higher taxes, subliminal deception, deep state, ace, made right here in Arkansas by a taxpayer-funded Chinese factory. Every bottle carefully crafted for you. Gender neutral. Nothing says aristocrat like Essence of Bureaucrat. Essence of Bureaucrat by Asa.
Available now in the Marble Palace gift shop.
Paul Harrell Parody. Bringing you your daily dose of truth. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back, everyone. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell today on Conduit News Radio. And that parody actually was a perfect segue, I think, into this next headline and article out from the Arkansas Democrat Gazette this morning. It kind of follows up on what Paul's been talking about, I think, yesterday and this week about the fight really to provide medical marijuana in the state. And the headline we have here is Pot Firms Fight Letter Secrecy. And the subheadline is High Court Lets Lawyer See Document Clients in the Dark. This is an article by Hunter Field. And it really, piggybacks on that parody there, the essence of bureaucrat, backroom deals, secrecy, lack of transparency. Because what's happened, if you're just hearing about this, the state attorneys submitted a letter and wanted to submit this, or did submit it, I guess now, under seal. And the only people who were able to see that were the other attorneys in the case, but the article talks about how even their clients weren't allowed to see it. It says here, Attorney General Leslie Rutledge asked the Arkansas Supreme Court in a Tuesday motion to let her file a document to the court under seal, quote, for reasons that will be apparent on the face of the tendered letter. In the unusual order, the court on Wednesday allowed the letter to be distributed to the counsel of record for each party in the case, but it barred those attorneys from sharing the letter with anyone else, even their own clients. The court's order was entered at 10:46 on Wednesday, and it gave attorneys until 4:30 p.m. to argue whether the document should remain secret. Naturalis Health, the lead plaintiff in the case, said in its response that the document should be made public. They say, quote, in the interest of transparency and full disclosure, Naturalis believes the document tendered by the Attorney General's office should be filed of record and subject to inspection by the general public, an attorney for the company wrote. So, this follows up with Judge Wendell Griffin's order that basically put the entire licensing process and implementation of medical marijuana on hold because of what he deemed was an unfair process. And so now they have this letter that's been submitted under seal. Don't really know what's going on. And, I think this attorney here actually has a good point. In the interest of transparency and full disclosure, they think it should be turned over to the public because at the end of the day, this is, a public commission, a state-run commission that's overseeing this process, and it should be an open and transparent process. And any lawsuits or things that come up in it should be transparent. There is a proper place to make sure that, trade secrets or things like that don't come out in open court. But maybe that's what was in there. But absent of that, it is, very rare to have something like this under seal. And so they will move forward, and they said the State Department has approved more than 4,000 applications for registry ID cards that would allow patients with one of 18 qualifying conditions to purchase the drug, which will be sold at 32 dispensaries around the state. So those 4,000 people, they're just sitting there and waiting at this point to see what comes out of this court case and how that's going to go back to the commission and how that will set up. So we're about to take a break. On the other side of this break, we have Drake Mowdy, a conservative future segment, and we'll be back right after this. You're listening to Conduit News.
The news and talk of Northeast Arkansas. This is News Talk, 101.3 FM and 1230 AM KBTM, Jonesboro, an EAB radio station.
It's a good, that's a good explanation. We're talking with Congressman Bruce Westerman. He is from District 4. Just coming out of a massive primary win for him. Congressman, what else? Tell me about this. I saw this over on Fox News, the passage of a right to try for terminally ill patients. We're looking at the Fox News article right now. Tell us about this.
Yeah, and this was another big bill that goes to the president's desk, that all this happened on Tuesday. The day of the primary election, I was in D.C. voting for these bills, but we got the financial reforms and this Right to Try Act passed that allows terminally ill patients to use experimental drugs if they choose to do so. The FDA had put barriers up that would prevent people from trying these experimental drugs, but I think people deserve that right to try those drugs if if the doctors have said there's nothing else we can do for you, but they know there's an experimental drug that hasn't made it through all the FDA trials yet.
Mm-hmm.
We gave patients that right to choose.
Wow. Did you guys have any pushback against that? I'm curious. I mean, because you would think this is just a basic concept. I mean, I wish you could. I mean, I wish people had more freedom to try this kind of stuff before they were, given a death sentence. Personally, I mean, I would go even further with it. But did you have any pushback from people? Go ahead.
I had a lot of pushback from Nancy Pelosi and her friends on the other side of the aisle. Saying that allowing somebody to take a drug that the FDA hasn't determined the effects of it is cruel, those kinds of arguments. But, if your option is you're going to die, or you could possibly try this drug, I would want the right to try the drug.
Yeah. And here's the thing. With these days, in this time, there are so many resources out there for people to do their own research. I mean, I was watching a podcast the other day where they were saying, there's this clinic down in Panama where they're having these amazing successes with this certain type of stem cell, and of course they're ethical stem cells. They're not embryonic. They're but yet we've got regulations here that are preventing that treatment from being done, in the United States. But down there, they're having these incredible results. And so I guess my point is, there's all this information out there that people can get with the internet to kind of make their own decisions. And so, why not? And of course, if you're terminally ill, you're not just going to go out and try any old drug. You're going to be like, okay, I think this is going to help me. And you're going to do the research. I think most people would say that's a reasonable expectation.
Right. Well, and there are snake oil salesmen out there too. So, that's one of the most atrocious things of somebody trying to take financial advantage of someone at a point like that in their life. But you're right as far as drugs that are experimental. That the bureaucracy in the FDA is unbelievable, and it takes years and years to get drugs through trials. And there's good and bad to that as well. But, I've got a friend whose wife had a disease, and there were treatments for it, but couldn't be done here in the U.S., and he actually, as a last resort, took her to China to get treatment. And she did survive longer from those treatments, but she could have had the treatment here in the U.S. had it been approved by the FDA.
Wow. Yeah. Well, that's good. I think that anytime we're allowing people more choice, so when it comes to their health care, is a good thing. And so this is a step in the right direction. We're talking with Congressman Bruce Westerman. And so, Congressman, what I want to know is, I was at the Craighead County Republican Lincoln Day dinner last Saturday, where your colleague, Majority Leader Kevin McCarthy, was in Arkansas. And
right.
Some people are saying that he is, he's the next Speaker of the House. There were reports this week, though, that, maybe there's some others being considered. Jim Jordan's name gets thrown around. So I guess I'm curious, well, what's the feeling? What do you think's going to happen?
Well, I think Kevin would definitely be the front runner if the election were to happen right now, but there's a lot to take place before that election happens in November after the general election.
I think it's time we ask ourselves if we still know the freedoms that were intended for us by the Founding Fathers.
They seem to be in full-scale retreat from spending cuts and are talking about raising people's taxes again. And I have only one thing to say to the tax increasers. Go ahead, make my day.
If we lose freedom here, there's no place to escape to. This is the last stand on earth. Those who would trade our freedom for security have embarked on this downward course. Whether we believe in our capacity for self-government or whether we abandon the American Revolution and confess that a little intellectual elite in a far distant capital can plan our lives for us better than we can plan them ourselves.
Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell is on now.
All right, good morning, everyone. Morning. Sorry about that. I think we're having a couple technical difficulties. Good morning. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul Harrell on Conduit News Radio this morning. Sorry about that. We're having a little struggles with this mute button. You can tell I'm new. But I'm excited to be filling in for Paul today. This is the conservative number one source for conservative news and politics here in the state. It's the intersection of conservative ideas and reality. And you can be part of the show. Please call in or text. You can call in and text at 870-275-9799. We had a great first hour of the show. If you weren't able to catch that, I encourage everyone to go subscribe to the podcast in the Apple Podcast app or on SoundCloud, Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell. You can get the first hour there, and then as soon as this live streams video is over, you can watch it in its entirety at facebook.com/Conduit News or at conduitnews.com on YouTube, Conduit News. So many options, many platforms that Conduit News is on, and encourage everyone to go out there and listen to the first hour. We talked first about Jeremy Gillum is resigning as House Speaker to go and become lobbyist. I think his title is Director of Governmental Affairs for the University of Central Arkansas. And then we had an interview with Mark West, who is running for governor. So go check the first hour out. But right now, we're going to have a conservative future segment. That's something, Paul and Conduit News has every so often, highlighting some of the young conservatives across the states, the next, the leaders for the liberty movement here in Arkansas. And so I've invited Drake Mowdy, who's come on, and I think he's on the line with us right now. Drake, good morning.
Good morning to you, Josh. How are you this fine morning?
I'm doing well. And I was just telling Joe I got a Facebook notification on my calendar and didn't realize this, but today is actually your birthday, isn't it?
It is.
Well, happy birthday. Big 20.
Well, thank you.
Yeah. Well, tell the audience just a little bit about yourself, where you're at, and just a little bit about who you are.
Yeah, absolutely. So I am actually originally from El Dorado, Arkansas, and I am going into my junior year at the University of Arkansas, studying both political science and history, with the intentions of going to law school after that. And so I'm just here at the University of Arkansas trying to make a difference and trying to bring a conservative message to campus and to really highlight all the good things that conservatism stands for, and how that can affect our lives and the lives of those of our neighbors as well.
Great. And are you the chair of College Republicans at University of Arkansas? Is that correct?
I am. I am the chair of the College Republicans of the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville, and I'm also the state finance director for the Arkansas Federation of College Republicans.
Great. I was thinking the other day, my freshman year of college, in the spring, I guess that would have been 2010. I went to the College Republicans Convention, and if I remember right, we met there at the RPA headquarters in kind of a smaller room, and gosh, there's maybe 25 of us. And I think I saw a picture, and then my senior year, 4 years later, quite a few more. We had moved, I think, over to the state old Supreme Court room at the state capitol. But I think I saw some pictures. I mean, y'all just packed out the Capitol up there, it looked like, this last year.
Yeah, absolutely. At our last convention, we actually pretty well filled up the Arkansas Senate chamber, and it's really refreshing to see the growth of the Republican Party at the college level. You know, we see just universities that are starting to really grow at a grassroots level, and that's really refreshing, especially when we go to think about the party and the future of the Republican Party of Arkansas, and it's just really refreshing and humbling, I guess is the best way to say it, to see that all the work that those that came before us, that their work has not gone in vain. It's very positive momentum, and it's a positive growth, and that's really, really nice.
Yeah, absolutely. You know, it's just really in the last 10 years, you know, it's just grown exponentially, the Republican Party. But Drake, one thing, you know, as part of these conservative future segments, Paul usually asks about, you know, well, what does conservatism mean to you? You know, I'm a fellow Republican, and I, you know, respect the platform and the principles and, you know, how that's conservative. But, you know, to you, what does conservatism mean, and why are you a conservative?
Yeah, absolutely. So I firmly believe that the best way to have a positive impact on those lives around me is to enact principles that limit government growth and expand personal freedoms. And I think the best way to do that is to engage in the political spectrum and the political arena and really push for candidates that uphold those values. Because at the end of the day, to me, it's all about the single mother who, you know, goes to the grocery store, and at the end of her, you know, mile-long receipt, sees all the taxes that are at the end of her receipt. And even as a college student, seeing that, you know, I think that's really something that we've got to take pause on and reflect and figure out, you know, is this really the best way to be doing this, you know, whole government thing? Is it something that we can do better? How can we increase efficiencies, decrease inefficiencies, and promote our fellow neighbor while still, you know, having a sustainable government? And I think that's what it means to be a conservative. It's not, you know, we're for this or we're against this. It's about helping one another.
Yeah. Man, I like that first line he said, especially, you know, limiting government growth and thereby expanding freedom. I mean, that's why I'm conservative too. So,
yeah,
that's great. One thing we talked about the other day, and in some texts is, you know, this issue of free speech on campus. Tomorrow on the show, we're going to have a representative from a group called FIRE, and they're going to talk, you know, kind of on the national level, some trends, free speech on campus. But since you are a college student there at the University of Arkansas, I just wanted to, you know, ask you about that, get your perspective on free speech on campus there at the U of A.
Yeah, absolutely. So whenever we were talking about this, you know, one of the first things I kind of thought of was that I think this is true for all of us, you know, whether we want it to be or not, but a vast majority of us are very pro-free speech as long as we kind of agree with that. And that's, you know, a personal bias that we all have to work on, but that's something that you really see hit hard on college campuses, is that if someone doesn't agree with you, then they don't think that you have the right to speak. And that's something that we really have to, that we struggle with on college campuses specifically across the nation and not just in the state. Specifically to the University of Arkansas at Fayetteville, it's a pretty complex issue, actually. More so, I would say, than maybe at other college campuses. As you know, Fayetteville is a very leftist-center, progressive-thinking, progressive-leaning haven in northwest Arkansas, which is, you know, pretty juxtaposed to the rest of the state. And the same is true of college campuses. They're very leftist-center. However,
that's a very nice way of putting it, but yes.
Well, you know, I try.
Yeah, go ahead.
The demographic of the U of A actually lean more to the right. You know, we have a large population of students that are, you know, white, upper middle class, that fit that mold, that are actually more right of center. So it's really interesting when we host events on campus. We have those people that obviously lean to the right, but then the minority of students that actually are left of center are the ones that are very loud and ruckus when it comes to any specific event or anything. So it's really interesting at the University of Arkansas, I would say. We're really thankful. You know, honestly, we don't have a lot of pushback from the university itself. If anything, it's from the students at the university. And I think of this one instance. Back in the 2016 general election, we were hosting a tabling event outside the Arkansas Student Union with other organizations, non-political organizations, things like that. And we had all of our college Republicans literature and just literature on the Republican Party and what it means to be a conservative and all the stuff that goes along with that. And somebody who is a very big Clinton supporter walked by and grabbed all the literature and threw it up in the air, threw it on the ground, and started shouting obscenities about our current president. And so it's moments like that where we have to pause and kind of think about, okay, let's continue pushing for our message, but at the same time, let's be productive with how we do it. Now, granted, that instance was, nothing we can control, but those instances where you see the pushback from the students. But that just means we're doing something right at the end of the day.
Yeah. So I guess y'all probably didn't, though, create a safe space for that person the next
No,
day. So.
we did not create a safe space. That's not something that we would be doing, I can guarantee you.
Okay. Well, that's a unique perspective, and, I think I've heard it, it varies from campus to campus. So appreciate your perspective on that. One thing we were talking about the other day as well is maybe that event was one of them, but something I know y'all are doing with the College Republicans group is volunteering a lot, on campaigns or getting involved in campaigns and, really getting young people out to vote and registering to vote. And so really that's, at the end of the day, that's what it is about. You got to get people to turn out and vote. And so I was really glad to hear y'all are working so hard on that.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a lot of general elections in Northwest Arkansas specifically, so that's something that our group is going to be focused on. We've got people like Don Clements running in the Arkansas 4th Senate District, who's running against, it's not an incumbent, but someone that's very well known.
Mm-hmm.
So we've really got to work with her to promote her platform of sustainable government, high quality education, and job growth.
Mm-hmm.
We've got to get the elbow grease and let the shoes hit the pavement and get out there and knock doors for her and let people know that this is a message that she's bringing to the community and she's bringing to Fayetteville. And quite frankly, it's one that Fayetteville alone hasn't seen a lot of lately.
Yeah.
And I'll say Dawn has a lot of great ideas. She's got a lot of great support from prominent members of the community just from talking with her. And so, it's one of those things that we've got to get out. We've got to do the legwork, and we've got to work with her and her campaign and her team to really enact these conservative principles, because at the end of the day, it all comes back to electing conservatives who implement conservative ideals and conservative policies to better our lives and the lives of our Kansans around us. And that's what it's about at the end of the day.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm from Fayetteville as well, and so I'm so glad she is running, and I just really hope she's able to defeat Greg Letting there in that Senate district, because Fayetteville, unfortunately, a lot of times we don't even have a Republican option, and so I'm really excited to see where she goes, and I know I'm going to try to help where I can, and glad to hear y'all are as well to make sure we get a Republican in that Senate seat rather than a Democrat. So I think that's great. Now you are also working on another campaign though, right, for County Judge Joseph Wood there in Washington County.
That is correct. I'm working with Judge Wood to help build a better Washington County. We're excited of all the successes that the judge has had this past year, and we're looking forward to continue to working and advocating for and building upon those successes. And we're just really interested to see and excited to see where this opportunity takes us. And we're really looking forward to building a better county, not only for the residents of Fayetteville and Springdale, but for those residents in Farmington, Prairie Grove, Lincoln, other sides outside of the central hub of Washington County.
Yeah. And, unfortunately, I think a lot of people, don't understand the importance of a county judge and even justices of the peace at the local level, but they run the county government. It's so very important. We, are also invested in at the least informed on what the county governments are doing. And, under Judge Wood's leadership, they've really turned the tide there from the previous Democrat administration. And it looks like there might be more help on the way with some more conservative JPs running. Lance Johnson, Patrick Deakins, Jim Wilson, I know are all running there in Washington County. And so I think things are setting up to be very successful for the near future for Washington County. So I'm glad to hear your, state senate, county judge races. I mean, that's great, Drake.
Absolutely, yeah. We're really looking forward to getting out and, like I said, letting our shoes hit the pavement, knocking on some doors, phone banking, and really energizing the general populace of Northwest Arkansas. Because, we've all talked about it and we've all thought about it a lot. And, the Democratic Party of Arkansas, they're really out for Northwest Arkansas. They're really interested in cutting into our House supermajority. And we've got other House races that are have a Democratic opponent that we haven't seen in the past have a Democratic opponent. And so now that primary season's over with, we're just ready to all come together and to elect and reelect those that share our Arkansas values. And once again, it all comes back to electing those people to implement those policies that we honestly and genuinely believe will affect the most people.
Yeah. Well, Drake, I appreciate you coming on, and feel free to reach out to the show to get us information about, the work going on there with Judge Wood and the candidates and with the college Republicans there at U of A, and let us know how we can help.
All right. Thank you, Josh. Will do, and I enjoyed being on the show today.
All righty. Well, I hope you have a great birthday.
Thank you, sir. Have a good one.
All right. Take care. All right, well, we are up against a break right now, so I want to thank Drake for coming on and talking about the good work they're doing up there, up in Washington County, my neck of the woods. And, it's at the end of the day what Drake said, if we don't get these conservatives elective to, limit government growth and expand freedom, then all the talk's kind of for nothing. So glad to see the good work he's doing up there. So we will take a break, and again, coming up at 7:30, Dr. Joe Cloud's going to be on with us. He's running for state representative in House District 71, so looking forward to talking with him. But we're going to take a break right now. You're listening to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul, and we'll be back right after this.
Do you need conservative legislation killed?
Or do you need policies enacted that ensure government growth?
Then you need to get
Nephewed. Hi, I'm nephew number 1 of uncle, nephew, and nephew, attorneys at law. I'm not a lawyer, but I am a senator.
And I'm nephew number 2, and I am a lawyer and also a senator.
Are you the victim of a recent accident in which the voters in your community mistakenly elected a limited government conservative who is now actually implementing the ideas he or she campaigned on?
That's right, nephew number 1. Don't be a victim of democratic elections any longer. At Uncle, Nephew, and Nephew, we are committed to killing limited government legislation and promoting bills that increase the size of government by using any tool at our disposal.
Because sometimes the truth of the matter is, principles get in the way of pragmatism.
Just listen to some of our great testimonials.
Ever since I've been using the nephews, all my special interests have been served. As long as you make sure your contract says lobbying services are prohibited, then the legal services of uncle, nephew, and nephew are legal. Trust me, put the nephews on them.
It came out of nowhere. I was blindsided. last election cycle when my well-funded and paid-for politician lost to some grassroots limited government voters. But then I hired the nephews, and they killed all the conservative policies the voters wanted. I got nephewed.
I got nephewed too, and so can you. Uncle, nephew, and nephew will accept compensation via campaign contributions. Put the nephews on them.
PHP Parody.
Exposing the truth and everything the Marble Palace establishment keep trying to cover up. It's Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back. This is Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell, and this is Josh Waters filling in for Paul today. We're about to have to go to another break, but wanted to just touch on this article that was out June 5th, a couple days ago, about the state budget, the money that runs the state. Very important topic. And so the headline over at the Arkansas Democrat Gazette is State reports $44 million surplus at end of May. Month misses projections but still beats 17 revenue. Before we dive into the numbers, that's a headline we have seen month after month, it seems like, is, we're having record revenue, but we're missing forecasts. And that's because we're increasing spending so much and at such a high pace and at such a high percentage and a total dollar amount, $600 million in the last 4 fiscal years. So that's where we're at. It's hard to keep up with how much we want to spend, even though we're having record revenue every month. And so when you sit back and you ask yourself, what we talked about a little bit last segment, we're wanting to limit government growth. We're wanting government to get smaller. And you just can't do that if you're spending like we've been spending. So we'll get into this article. It says, with the month remaining in the current fiscal year, Arkansas's net general revenue has eclipsed last year's 11th month total by nearly $160 million. So at this point, compared to last year, we've brought in $160 million more. $160 million more than last year. May's gross general revenue collections of $473 million exceeded by 0.9% the same collections from a year ago, but they fell shy of projections by $23.6 million or 4.8%, according to DFNA monthly report. The report, Governor Hutchinson said in a statement, positions the state for a strong finish to fiscal 2018. Like I was just saying, it says here, May's report follows a record-breaking April in which $824.8 million in gross revenue was collected. The month of April typically accounts for the highest month of collection because it's when tax returns are due. Last month, the state's two largest sources of general revenue, individual income taxes, and, I lost my spot here, individual income taxes and sales and use taxes, each exceeded year-ago totals by 4.5 and 4.7%. And so there's more details there. I recommend going out Arkansas Online and seeing all the details. But the takeaway, again, like most months, is we have record revenue, but it's not keeping pace with forecasts for the month. I think for the year overall, it's outpacing maybe the forecasts, if I read that correctly. But as long, with the RSA and the system we have, if the money comes in, they're going to spend it. And absent some type of tax expenditure limit that would limit government growth from year to year, we're just going to spend more and more and more. So this is Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell. This is Josh Waters filling in, and we'll be back right after this.
And, the main thing I want to make sure of is that the next Speaker of the House isn't an old one named Nancy Pelosi. So that's priority number one, to make sure that we retain the majority, and she's not the new Speaker. But Kevin's the majority leader. He was in the Speaker's race briefly until Paul Ryan got pulled into it last time, and he backed out. And has been a great supporter of Paul. He's from California, but he's from a part of California that I think we don't often realize is even in California anymore with most of the stuff that comes out of California. But he's from a rural area, from Bakersfield.
Yeah.
He tells me he's more redneck than most Arkansans are, and I give him a hard time about being a California surfer boy. But he's the furthest thing from that. But you got the streets of Bakersfield out there. Some pretty strong country music legends came out of Bakersfield as well.
Yeah. Oh wow, interesting.
And
yeah.
I think Roy Clark and wasn't Merle Haggard from Bakersfield?
Maybe. Yeah, some people want me to do Merle Haggard Mondays, and in addition to Johnny Cash Fridays. So tell me, Bruce, what do you think? You mentioned we got a Nancy Pelosi, right? I mean, I don't know if you saw the recent video of her. And she keeps kind of, having these moments that are really troublesome. Not from regardless of a political standpoint of view, like just you're like, whoa, is something is she healthy? But this blue wave, okay, it's a blue wave. Blue wave's going to come, but then you got polling now in a generic ballot. They're now saying Republicans got a 6-point advantage now. That could change between now and November. What are the Republicans feeling? I mean, do you have any colleagues that have legitimate opposition that are worried?
Oh yeah, across the country, there's in all races you have to take them serious. You can't, especially when you're at the the congressional level. I mean, these are big races with. I think a lot of people might get into congressional races not understanding the magnitude of what running one is like and what can happen through the course of one. The amount of just paper.
The intersection of conservative ideas and reality. Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, everyone, welcome back to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul today. I want to give a shout-out to our Facebook audience and live streaming audiences on YouTube and at conduitnews.com and on live stream. It's facebook.com/conduitnews if you want to watch online. And I also want to give a shout-out to all the terrestrial listening stations, and especially right now our affiliate KARV there in the River Valley in the Russellville area. And the reason I mention that is because right now we actually have Dr. Joe Cloud from the Russellville area, and he is running for House District 71 as a Republican for state representative. Good morning, Dr. Cloud.
Good morning, Josh.
Well, welcome to the show. I wanted to have you on to just have you talk about your race and how it's going. And I think don't believe you've been on the show before, so kind of broader topics. Just a little bit about yourself and why you're running for office.
Well, Josh, I appreciate the opportunity to be with you today. My wife Cherry and I moved to Russellville in the River Valley in 1986. After finishing a obstetrics gynecology residency at University of Arkansas for Medical Sciences in Little Rock. We established our home here and have been very blessed. I had a very blessed and great practice for over 28 years here. And about a year ago, Josh, after I had retired, started having some conversations with Senator Greg Standridge, and even after he became ill, every conversation I had with Greg would always go back to politics, and he kind of sparked my interest, I guess you might say, and then I had conversations with other folks. It's easy to sit on the sidelines, Josh. It's easy to not be involved. But when something gets on your heart, you go ahead and hopefully you step up. And so that's kind of what's brought me to this arena and what I'm calling a second career. I desire to continue to serve the people of the River Valley and the people of the state of Arkansas. And I think I can do that in the House of Representatives.
Great. Okay. So you mentioned you are a doctor from the Russellville area, but on your Facebook page, I'm looking there and got some other notes here. That you're a conservative, pro-life, and pro-Constitution. So just talk a little bit about that and the issues that are passionate to you.
Okay, I appreciate that, Josh. You don't have enough time for me to talk about pro-life. I promise you that. But in a nutshell, I've been pro-life all my life. I've been very active locally in the Choices Pregnancy Resource Center. I've been very active in the American Association of Pro-Life Obstetricians and Gynecologists. Very troubled by the fact that we have legally aborted over 60 million Americans now, and that's more than all of our wars combined. We've lost Americans in tragedies, in all of those combined numbers. We've aborted more human life than that. There's really two people that suffer with abortion. It's not just the unborn child, Josh. The statistics have proven that women who have undergone abortion suffer from depression. They suffer from an increased risk of substance abuse, suicide, even other medical issues, not to mention their reproductive organs only, but even breast cancer. So it's a huge issue for our nation. We started down this path in 1973, and there have been recent efforts to try to reverse some of the pro-abortion legislation, and I'm certainly on board for that. I am 100% pro-life.
Great.
You also mentioned being a constitutionalist. The Constitution, in my opinion, and in the opinion of the Republican Party, Josh, the Constitution is a literal document.
Mm-hmm.
The United States, and I've found this as out visiting with people, the United States is a republic. It is not a democracy.
That's right. Thank you for saying that. Many people are confused by that.
I've been really amazed at the number of people that I've talked to that don't realize the difference or just think that we're a democracy. A democracy, the majority rules. They can tell me to wear all gray clothes and to drive a certain automobile, or to not be able to drive an automobile or whatever, just by a majority vote. But a republic is different from that. The republic has guaranteed by our Constitution, the power is held by the people, and then the people give that power to their elected officials. And as you stated in your opening, I'm running for House of, and I emphasize the word representative. If I'm not representing my constituency, I'm not doing my job, because that's part of what a republic is. The exercise of the power that's given by the people is under the set of laws as laid out in the Constitution. So I'm very much a constitutionalist. I believe the Constitution has some guarantees to the individual against the majority. We have a right to speak. We have a right to think. We have a right to worship. We have a right to vote. And those are things that are blessings for the United States of America that other countries, a lot of them don't have those rights. And that's sad to me. But we are a republic, and we are protected as far as our life, our liberty, and our property by the government. but we don't need to let the government go beyond that.
Yeah, man, that's great to hear. That's really refreshing. Unfortunately, we hear, from politicians, I hear a lot is, well, I'm going to do this for you, I'm going to do that for you, that kind of a thing, which, that's part of it. But to hear a candidate for office, going back to the original founding document that set up the government and defines what the role of government is, like you've done, I mean, that's really refreshing. And just thanks for sharing that with us. And so this is House District 71. Ken Henderson is not running for re-election. So it's you, the Republican, versus a Democrat opponent. And so remind everyone, I know it's the Russellville area, but I wasn't sure, if it's just Russellville or what the whole district encompasses there.
Josh, it is primarily Russellville. District 71 extends up toward Dover, but not to Dover. It extends toward Atkins, but not, to Pottsville, but not to Pottsville, not into Pottsville. And then it's bordered on the southern by the Arkansas River. So it's primarily Russellville proper.
Okay, great. All right. So, you've laid out, your pro-life position, pro-constitution position, conservative position. How can people maybe find out more about you, Facebook or Twitter or, website? I'm not sure what you have there, but if you have events going on, or how can people, interact with you during this campaign season?
I'm easy to get a hold of, Josh. They can contact me directly if they would wish to. I am on Facebook, Cloud for State Rep, and easy to find there. And I'm accessible. I'll be glad to talk to anyone. Doesn't matter about your party affiliation. It's just my heart's desire to serve. If I could say quickly, I went back to several conversations I had with Greg, and one of the greatest blessings he received out of being a senator was when people would call him with what to them were insurmountable problems, and he was able to help them navigate because of his position. So, that's what I want to do. I want to be able to serve the people of Russellville and the people of the state of Arkansas.
Wow, that's great. The heart of a servant, that's straight from the Bible. And, it's great to hear, Senator Standridge's legacy is living on in others. I'll give you the last word, Dr. Cloud, before we head to break, and just anything else you want to share with the voters out there.
Well, yes, Josh, since you mentioned the Bible, our Pledge of Allegiance to the flag of the United States of America, not only to the flag, but then there's that word "and" to the republic for which it stands, and we discussed that, one nation under God.
Mm-hmm.
So I would just like to be able to point out that word God means the Jehovah God. It's the Yeshua of the Old Testament. It's not something that man has made with their own hands. It's not something that we conjure up. The founding fathers believed in the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob, the God of I Am. And so that's the God I believe in. And that's who ultimately I want to serve and want to please.
Amen. Well, Dr. Cloud, I appreciate you coming on. I appreciate that testimony there as well. Your stand for Christ. It's really refreshing to hear this morning speaking with you, and just want to thank you for coming on and just let us know how we can help, and best of luck to you.
Okay. Thank you very much, Josh. I appreciate the opportunity.
Yes, sir. Well, take care. And we are going to go ahead and go to a break here. We want to thank Dr. Joe Cloud for being on. He's running for House District 71 there in Russellville. And that election will be coming up in November. And like he said, he has a Facebook page. I pulled that up. It's Joe A. Cloud, MD, on Facebook. Looks like you can find out some more there and see some pictures and posts he's made about his candidacy for state representative. So we're going to go ahead and take a break. You're listening to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell. This is Josh Waters filling in for Paul today, and we'll be back after this.
Russellville-based firearms manufacturer Omega are making clones of the most notable German firearms in the world. These delayed rotor lock firearms have been and are currently used by law enforcement and military worldwide. At Omega, they manufacture their guns right here in Arkansas and produce the best reproduction in the marketplace that comes with a complete 5-year warranty. At Omega, they take firearm manufacturing seriously and offer discounts to active and retired law enforcement. Whether you're using Omega firearms to defend the public, defend your family, or for target practice, Omega has your back. For pricing, go to omega-guns.com. That's omega-guns.com. If you're like me, you believe that small business is the heart of Arkansas's economic engine, and it should be viewed that way by the politicians in Little Rock. Conduit for Commerce also believes, like you and I believe, policies that achieve less regulation and lower taxation help small business in Arkansas thrive. Other policies like small, constitutionally consistent government and reducing citizen dependency on government keeps it from growing and expanding its influence on our daily lives. Conduit for Commerce works every day to educate the general public and legislators on these important priorities in the name of Arkansas small business. By the way, contributions to Conduit for Commerce are tax deductible. Log on now to conduitforcommerce.org and click on Contact Us on the right side of the page. That's conduitforcommerce.org. Go there now and learn the facts on protecting small business in Arkansas.
In a world full of constituents with social media accounts, bloggers just looking to increase their page views, and a talk radio host who generally is just the worst, how are Little Rock's elite supposed to conduct business with such a lack of privacy? Introducing the 1835 Club, older and more refined than other clubs that claim discretion. The 1835 Club is for seasoned political veterans that want to conduct the highest form of aristocratic business with the public's money. Are you a schemer? Do you someday want a guaranteed flow of taxpayer money to support your business? Is it your dream to see the .gov domain at the end of your business website? Don't listen to the imitators. The 1835 Club is the place where corrupt politicians and businessmen hatch their next crony schemes. At the 1835 Club, we make lobbying safe and legal. Ethics. Why, of course. All business is done in an ethical manner. Just look for the sign above the door that reads, loophole. Are you tired of the Capitol Police restricting your access to the roof after a perfectly good night of drinking? The 1835 Club has libations and a perfectly good roof. Other crony clubs that promise discretion try to lure you in by advertising bars made out of aeroplanes. Well, at the 1835 Club, instead of an airplane fuselage, we've got a space shuttle. No, not a bar. We've got an actual space shuttle that makes a daily run to the moon so members of the 1835 Club can have some real privacy away from the bloggers and taxpayers. Are you an Arkansas aristocrat? Do you want to be? It's the 1835 Club, and we work tirelessly to make sure the good old boy system remains alive and well. Join today.
Disclaimer. The 1835 Club reserves the right to deny membership to anyone who has principles. Any talk of the Declaration of Independence or the Constitution must be done in jest or, at the very least, with a condescending tone. And finally, the 1835 Club will be given a 25% commission of any agreements made between politicians and the business community.
PHP Parody.
Need your daily news fix? Don't forget to tune in to Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell.
All right, welcome back, everyone. This is Conduit News Radio with Paul Harrell, and this is Josh Waters filling in for Paul today. And just want to give another thank you and shout out to our guests today. We just had Dr. Joe Cloud on, and we were talking during the break. It was really refreshing to hear his take. Someone with wisdom and experience, the life experiences needed to be down there. He's not looking for something from government. It didn't sound like so. I'm really excited to see what Dr. Cloud can do down there in Little Rock if he is elected in November. Then earlier on today we had Drake Mowdy on our Conservative Future segment, talking about his role as College Republicans chair at the University of Arkansas and the good work they're doing. And then we had Mark West on, a Libertarian candidate for governor, on earlier today. You can get all of those interviews will be clipped out over at our YouTube page later on today on YouTube. That's Conduit News. And you can go and listen to those specific interviews, or you can listen to the entire show. And if you listen to the entire show, the first thing we talked about today was the news that has come out that House Speaker Jeremy Gillum will be resigning effective June 15th and will become a lobbyist for UCA. In the article we talked about this morning mentioned how this is kind of an exception to the cooling off period for lobbyists. So under Arkansas law, there's actually a 2-year cooling off period that prohibits legislators from immediately going and becoming a lobbyist. But there's an exception if you do it for a public entity, for a government entity. And so he's moving on to UCA, and the article does a good job there breaking down of how this is, kind of a revolving door of legislator to state job, and he's will go from making $47,000 as a state legislator to $130,000 as a lobbyist for UCA. The article talked about, how Johnny Key kind of made this role, and now he's over at Department of Education. And several other legislators that have kind of followed that route as well. So that was the big news breaking off the show today. Something else we talked about earlier on the show today was a little bit about the tax task force, and there's been some controversy there from some posts, and it looks like it's really angered a few state reps in particular. A post we talked about last hour, Family Council put out a post saying, essentially, hey, this is what your tax task force is doing. This is what's on their agenda about, taxing, I think it was passive income to churches. I think we got there on our, for the listeners online, Arkansas lawmakers looking at proposal to tax churches, and it links there to the direct agenda item that showed where they were discussing that. And so, like we talked about this morning, what the process is right now, they're putting up proposals. And so they're putting a list out there, looking at everything on the table, and they're saying, well, we want to study this further. So we want to study the grocery tax further and see if we want to remove that exemption. And so the only way to ensure there's not a grocery tax exemption removal or a grocery tax increase is don't study it. Don't put it on the table. It kind of goes back to the idea of, well, we're not going to vote for a tax increase. We'll just vote to put it on the ballot with the deceptive ballot title and all that. But we'll put it on the ballot, but we won't actually vote for the tax increase. We'll put it on the ballot, and then we can come home to our constituents and say, we didn't vote for any tax increase. And, that sham's just, I think, really wearing out on the voters. The only way to ensure you don't have a tax increase is don't put a tax increase proposal in writing. Don't put it on a list to study further to see if we want to do this. I mean, it's okay maybe to look and see the cost of having exemption, that thing. I think that's probably good information to have. But the only way to ensure there's not a headline saying the legislature is looking at raising the grocery taxes, don't put an agenda item saying, hey, we're going to look at raising the grocery tax. That seems pretty simple, but that's where we're at. And so I was on Facebook, and I saw this post that kind of came right after this latest task force meeting. And in particular was one by State Representative Deanne Vaught. And she has this post here, and she says it's actually sharing a post from Fran Cavanaugh, State Representative Fran Cavanaugh, who is on the tax task force. But she shares that post and says this. She says, I'm not on this task force, but I've heard the churches all received a letter saying that we were going to tax churches. I do have a copy of it in my inbox if you want to see it. I'm very disappointed that the interest group lobbying that sent the letter to the churches would intentionally send a letter out with false information and then have a very small retraction saying, oops, we made a mistake. Now, you know, Paul has covered multiple times how unfortunately these politicians, they just yell liar anytime something said they might not like for people to hear. And so the truth is, whenever the tax task force met, it was on their agenda to look at these items for further study. And so that's what the post said, the email said, and then the day after it said, Senator Hendren had reached out to us, and who's the chair of the tax task force, the governor's nephew, reached out and said they're not really interested in looking at that it was just a proposal, but they're not really interested in raising that tax. And so I'm like, well, that's a victory. They put the information out there, the people contacted their legislators, and apparently the overwhelming outpour of support against raising taxes on churches, won the day, and almost the next day, immediately, there is another article saying, hey, they're not going to do this. And I think that's the way government should work. They have their meetings, they have their agenda items, people report on them, say, hey, this is what's going on, contact your legislator how you feel, and then they respond accordingly to their constituents. So we'll get back into this post from State Representative Deanne Vaught. She said, this is a group that does report cards on us for our votes. Now, she nowhere in here says the name of an entity, so you kind of have to extrapolate who she's talking about. She says, most people in Arkansas, talking about this group, look to for good conservatives. Please, like Representative Cavanaugh stated, don't hesitate to ask questions when you hear something. Not everything you read and hear is the actual truth. LOL. That's kind of, not everything you read and hear is the actual truth, LOL. Okay, I'll move on. It says, I may not know the answer, but I will work to find out the truth. And then I really like this hashtag. Hashtag knowledge is power. And if you're a listener of Conduit News, if you subscribe at conduitforaction.org, you can go there in the top corner and put your email address, subscribe, get all the latest in Arkansas news and politics and policy to improve the lives of Arkansans. You can get that there. A recurring theme of quizzes and information is that knowledge is power. I mean, that is said all the time on Conduit News and at Conduit for Action. So I like the hashtag, Representative Vaught. I do. I think knowledge is power, and we cannot suppress the truth. And I'll be filling in again for Paul tomorrow, and that's something we're going to talk a little about is free speech, suppressing the truth, political speech, and the importance of political speech. And these things like report cards, these things like sending out emails to letting constituents know and voters know, hey, this is what your government is doing. So I just wanted to share that post and kind of put that in context and wrap a bow on it there. But I want to thank everyone for listening today. If you missed any part of the show, again, you can go to facebook.com/conduitnews and see the show in its entirety. You can go to YouTube and get some clips of the show of our guests. You can watch it in its entirety there. And what I do a lot is get the podcast on the podcast app in the Apple Store. It's available, almost immediately after the show. And you can get that and be informed. And so I just want to thank everyone for listening to Conduit News Radio. This is Josh filling in for Paul. We'll be back tomorrow.
The news and talk of